Hello and welcome to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio programme from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn. This week on the show, a bold proposal for concrete action. Could EU membership help protect Greenland? Syrian returns leave Turkish businesses worrying about their labour force, and religion in Scotland's Western Isles, a portrait of a world caught between modernity and tradition. That's all coming up here on Inside Europe.
Sir, the Premier of Greenland said today, we prefer to stay with Denmark. Do you see that as the final word?
Who said that?
The Premier of Greenland.
Well, that's their problem. That's their problem. I disagree with him. I don't know who he is, don't know anything about him. But that's going to be a big problem for him.
Donald Trump may not know who Greenland's premier is. It's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen. But he sure does want the island. That much has been made clear, not least at Wednesday's meeting between high-level representatives of the Kingdom of Denmark, of which the autonomous territory is a part, Greenland and the US. But where is the EU in all this? Or perhaps more importantly, where could and should it be? Questions that Germany's former Vice-Chancellor, Robert Habeck, now working for the Danish Institute for International Studies, and Andreas Raspotnik, director of the Norwegian High North Centre for Business and Governance at Bordeaux's Nord University, addressed head-on in a Guardian op-ed this week. It was titled, "Trump is ready to grab Greenland. The EU should move first and offer it membership." It's a bold proposal for a proactive counter-offer, but is it feasible? I spoke to the op-ed's co-author, Andreas Raspotnik, and asked him to walk me through his logic.
The idea here really was that we read a lot about what Donald Trump wants. We read a lot about what, for very good reason, Greenland and the Greenlanders want. But in our opinion, we didn't read a lot about what Europe really wants and what Europe is in the Arctic. And here we thought in that entire Greenland discussion, where is the action-oriented counter-proposal by the Europeans? I'm not only talking about the European Union, but also by EU leaders. And one concrete idea could be, what about membership? Offer membership. Come up with a concrete proposal, a straightforward proposal, a deadline, a timeline. Join us. This is what we can offer. We can come back in a few years and renegotiate issues. And we all know that they deal with Europe, how complex this entity and our political arrangements are. But this would be a counter-proposal for Greenland. It would be something new.
So a really striking counter-proposal, but can this be done? Can you offer EU membership to an autonomous territory, or wouldn't that territory have to become independent first?
That's what I meant. It's all complex and it all depends. Of course, the decision, first and foremost, lies with the citizens of Greenland and the Greenlanders, and they have to decide either way. And of course, within that entire European system, the Kingdom of Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark, would have to take a certain lead and discuss it with the other member states. But it was more like, what about outlining this idea and said, okay, let's put the idea out there also to a broader public, like that we are in Europe, we can be action oriented in a way, and not always react to what comes from the other side of the ocean.
Okay, so putting technicalities aside for a moment, if the EU were to make Greenland that offer of membership, what would it stand to gain and what could it offer in return?
The rule-based order, talking to each other, meeting each other, finding compromises. That is Europe, and we could bring that kind of perspective on democracy and values, to Greenland, to the Arctic, that the entire region, for 2-3 decades defined as a zone of peace, and now this seems to change, for various reasons. So again, this is the idea. What is the vision? What can we bring to the table from this more narrative, normative perspective, And then in addition, the single market, if the US moves away from free trade, the single market is a success story in so many ways, and why not including Greenland including Greenland into a single market. The same with Norway and Iceland. This is a unique peace project we live in and we are, and we can offer something. If we want to be active for once, be concrete, don't make it complicated, offer something and then take it from there.
That's really interesting. And it does, of course, touch on those existential questions of what Europe is and what it wants to be. Should the EU extend membership to Greenland, that wouldn't just be a geographical expansion, because Greenland's population is majority Inuit. And if you look at the Arctic more widely, then it's home to almost 100% of Europe's indigenous peoples. And the history books, they don't exactly fill you with pride as a European in relation to that history. So what kind of conversations need to be happening now in order to make any overtures credible?
Well, this is a good and complex question. I guess I would start, to some extent, or to a major extent, this is still a responsibility by the nation states. I guess what Europe is already doing and could do maybe even better is can we include indigenous perspectives in decision-making processes, especially if we deal with the northern parts of Europe, and all kind of potentials when it comes to resource exploitation, renewable energy potentials, etc. How can we best include their perspective into that decision-making processes?
How concerned are you that your proposal could put the EU on a collision course with Russia, China, and of course the US?
We talk a lot about how we have to become more independent in all kind of ways. And we all know, or hopefully most of us Europeans know, that we're only stronger if we work together, not only on the European level, European scale, but also on the global one. What happens in the future? How can we cooperate or not cooperate with those neighbors? In that regard, it means that we should have an idea what's going on in the place. We should have concrete proposals and then, negotiate those with friends and enemies in a way that we are still heard and not always, following other people's lead, as we might did when it comes to security issues with the US over the past decades.
You began, Andreas Respotnik, by saying that there has been relative silence on the European front in relation to Greenland. One reason for European reticence would, of course, be the concern about precedents. If the EU were to offer Greenland membership, what would that mean for the Faroe Islands and Corsica? And then, of course, you've got places like Scotland and Catalonia, which have devolved powers and strong independence movements. If you open the door to this kind of internal fragmentation, where does that then leave Europe?
What are we afraid of? If we are confident enough that we should still be active and we should still have ideas for at least our immediate neighborhood on how we can best involve everyone in those decision-making processes and think together when it comes to the future, at least of our little continent. By taking into account we have these identities, we have these different ideas of who we are. And I'm originally from Austria, and Austria is small, but there are so many different ideas between the regions, but that is part of Europe.
Andreas Respotnik, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Andreas Respotnik is director of the High North Centre for Business and Governance at Bordeaux's Nord University and a senior researcher at the Fridtjof Nansen Institute in Oslo, Norway. You'll find a link to his Guardian op-ed with former German Vice-Chancellor Robert Habeck in our show notes. Now, to Turkey, where the end of the civil war in neighbouring Syria has seen hundreds of thousands of Syrians who had sought refuge in the country returning home. Many, of course, still remain. Turkey, after all, took in more Syrian refugees than any other country in the world, and their continuing presence has, according to polls, become a political liability for the government. However, many Turkish companies are dependent on Syrian labour, and their return is posing a major headache. Nowhere more so than in the industrial city of Gaziantep, close to Syria's border, hosting nearly 1 million Syrian refugees. Dorian Jones reports.
The Ince Boya Company is one of hundreds of small factories and workshops operating in Gaziantep. With a couple of dozen workers, hundreds of pieces of furniture are spray painted each day. The long hours in the air, thick with dust, are arduous and dirty work. Like many factories in the city, Syrians make up much of the workforce, as owner Halil Yarabe explains.
I can't get people from my own community to work in my sector. And many workshop owners and many businesses are unfortunately experiencing this. I mainly blame our own society, our own people, our children, our youth. They consider such work beneath them. They consider they fail in their families' eyes by working with their hands as a furniture maker or a mechanic. If you ask about the percentage of Syrians currently employed in places like this, the response would be somewhere between 50%, 70%, even 100%. Look, it's almost 100% Syrians here.
But many Syrians are now returning. In Gaziantep, over 100,000 have already left, including several from this factory. During a welcome tea break, returning home is on the lips of the workers. Ahmed Hach Hussein has been working here for over 5 years. He, too, is thinking of leaving.
Many people are returning. I have a relative who moves a family back to Syria every day. For me, I lived in Aleppo for 35 years. I have so many friends there. I haven't seen them for 14 years. I have 3 sisters there, and I didn't see them either. I want to go, but I don't have a house in Aleppo. You need to have money to pay the monthly rent. You need a job, but there is no work. My brother went back to Aleppo, but he says business is too slow. He's been waiting for the last 4 to 5 months to see if things would work out.
But Ahmed's son, Ibrahim, who started working here a year ago after leaving school, doesn't want to go.
I grew up here. This place became my second home. I do love it here a lot. I was 2 years old when I came here and never went back. I don't want to go back.
For Turkish companies like Ince Boya, they'll be hoping many Syrians think like Ibrahim, says Attila Yeşilada. He's Turkey's economic analyst for Global Source Partners. Yeşilada says Syrians are key for small factories and businesses across Turkey, and will continue to be so, given the demographic time bomb Turkey is facing.
Up to 900,000 out of 4 million Syrians find employment in Turkey. They filled all the low-paying jobs. Business people have indicated that without Syrians, they'll go bankrupt because that's what really keeps costs down. I mean, the birth rate has declined substantially. Turkish birth rate is now 1.5, and replacement is 2.1, and it's coming down significantly. It has been going on for maybe 20 years, and I don't think this trend is going to change. Our experience from China, Russia, shows that there is nothing you can do about that.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan making an appeal this month for families to serve the nation and have more children, while his family minister claimed nearly half of the families didn't have children. In a bid to draw workers, visa and work permit restrictions were lifted last year on Turkic nations of Central Asia. But at Ince Boya Company, its owner Yarabe is already counting the cost of Syrians leaving, claiming a bidding war to keep workers has started.
As the departures continue, I think we will have a lot of problems with our dependency on Syrians. Because as soon as the first return started, labor inflation started to rise here. Our employees, who we used to employ at 10,000 Turkish lira per week, have gone up to 12, 13, and now 15,000.
But for larger companies in Gaziantep, like Tut Holding, which makes furniture, sweets, as well as many other products, they are considering following their workers back to Syria, says CEO Salih Balta.
It is logistically very close to Gaziantep and offers us the opportunity to both produce and export at a cost reduced by up to 35%. We don't see Syria as just Syria. Syria is also a member of the Arab League. Under the free trade agreement with 17 Arab countries, this means that all Syrian production can be exported tax-free to all of them. For us, the Gulf countries are a very important market.
2 years ago, Gaziantep, along with many other cities across Turkey, witnessed protests against Syrians. Many polls found that the majority of people want them to return. But with nearly 1 million returning, it could well prove a double-edged sword, as businesses face growing economic pain at the loss of their workers. Dorian Jones, DW, Gaziantep.
A quick reminder of our email address, insideeurope@dw.com. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe. The islands of the Outer Hebrides off the northwest of Scotland are a remote, beautiful and sometimes awe-inspiring place. Also known as the Western Isles, they're the UK's last bastion of old-fashioned Christian Sunday observance, with strictures against working, shopping and even leisure activities on the Sabbath. But things are changing. Richard Baines sent us this report from Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis and Harris.
I'm in a supermarket on a Sunday morning, something I wouldn't have been able to do in Stornoway until November last year. That was when the local Tesco store, the biggest shop on Lewis, opened on a Sunday for the first time. Unlike the rest of the UK, which abandoned Sunday shutdowns decades ago, the tradition is still largely adhered to in the Western Isles. Churches like this one, the Free Presbyterian, are the reason. At this church, the hour-and-a-half-long service consists of psalm singing, readings, prayers, and a lengthy, passionate, gospel-based sermon from church elder Callum Finlayson.
We adhere to the 10 commandments, and one of these commandments is remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And all the denominations on these islands used to adhere strongly to the keeping of the Sabbath. You wouldn't have families hanging out the washing or going to the beach on the Sabbath here until very recently. You certainly wouldn't have had any shops open or hotels or pubs or the likes. And it isn't a fundamentalist control thing. I say you shouldn't break the Sabbath. You're not allowed to go out of your house and you're only allowed to go to church. It's about caring for people's souls.
Callum takes a dim view of much of the modern world.
Is rock music going to help you find Christ? I don't think so. It's not healthy. And rock music, historically, it has not been a great friend of Christianity. And it hasn't brought anybody to Christ, or it certainly hasn't brought very many people to Christ.
But he's seen his own regular congregation shrink to just 7 people, less than a quarter of what it was 30 years ago. Almost everyone at this service is aged over 70.
Do you think that your church will change with the times in order to maybe just keep its numbers alive?
I don't think so. I mean, there was a movement within our church courts to modernise, as people said, to be more progressive, as people put it. But for our denomination to start bringing in things that make the church more relevant, we will lose the reverence that is an essential part of our worship.
There are around 15 churches in this small town, largely a result of the continued splintering of the National Presbyterian Church of Scotland and its descendants.
This is the side door of the church. We're just going to head into the sanctuary.
Another of those splinters is the Free Church of Scotland in Stornoway. Here there's an outreach officer, Marianne Campbell.
Come in here, it's nice and quiet in here.
Marianne organises open days at the church for tourists who pour off cruise ships into the town, and she finds other ways to engage with would-be worshippers.
Social media for the church is a useful tool. I think it's useful communication. People are on Facebook, they're on Instagram, and so we can use that to spread the good news.
Her church sees hundreds of worshippers on a Sunday, and she hopes that will continue with a growth in numbers at Bible classes for teenagers.
The world on your phone is huge. It's a big social experiment on this generation. They've been called the anxious generation, and it's just so directly linked to having a device that is designed for addiction. All these algorithms, it's all feeding the worst fears of teenage girls or the worst habits of teenage boys. We want them to be thinking and not passive consumers. They're looking for reality. They're looking for something to hold on to that's not shifting, and the Bible offers that.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allah.
Pakistani Muslims first came to the Western Isles in the 1950s as travelling salesmen. This unassuming single-storey building became the island's first mosque 7 years ago.
To my knowledge, there has never been any conflict between the Muslim community or the local community.
Shopkeeper Abdul Ghaffar is a trustee of the mosque.
They were running on a parallel routes without actually conflicting with each other. The general Muslim community tend to be very traditional, and the local community is actually very traditional and religion bound, and so was ours. So neither side actually conflicted with the other.
Now there are Muslims here from Syria, Iraq and Bangladesh, a total of around 60 people. While they stick to their own traditions, there's one practice Muslims have adopted from the wider community.
I would never even think about opening on Sunday. For me, again, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but at least that's one day I can spend with my family, with my friend, visit and so on kind of thing. I would never give that up for anything.
Your attention is drawn to the passenger emergency instruction notices, which are displayed at the muster stations.
But changes here seem inevitable. For instance, I'm sailing out of Stornoway on a Sunday afternoon. Sunday ferries were only introduced here in 2009. On my journey home, I reflect on Marianne Campbell's success in reaching young people, and Abdul Ghaffar's take on the reason many religious groups worldwide, including, he says, Islam, are dwindling.
The faith is losing the children rather than the children losing faith, because it's not being portrayed the way it should be.
Richard Baines, 4DW, on the ferry home from Scotland's Outer Hebrides.
A portrait of change in one of the most remote corners of the continent. This is Inside Europe, and I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. Welcome back to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio programme from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn. Past, present and future. Coming up in the next half hour, two stories of unlikely comebacks. The Finnish communications company Nokia and female composers of the Renaissance. Plus, the final instalment of Our Age is Just a Number series. But we'll begin with Nokia. And as a child of the 90s and noughties, I am far from immune to the instant nostalgia rush that name still somehow manages to conjure for my generation, long after we've all swapped our Nokia brick mobiles for shiny new smartphones. Long a business case study in how a market-leading brand can suddenly crash and burn if it fails to keep up with technological innovation. Today, Nokia is back as a global leader in radio and mobile communication technology. And, as Lars Bavanger now reports, the Finnish company has an ambition to keep the whole of Europe safe.
Entering Nokia's spanking new R&D headquarters in a forest near Oulu in northern Finland, I have to step across sticky tape to make sure the soles of my shoes are clean. I'm about to see cutting-edge communications technology, much of it for the defence market, some of it secret.
So during the tour, you can only take photos when we allow that, and this room is one of the places where you can.
The room I'm entering looks like something out of a James Bond movie. It's the size of a small sports hall, walls and ceilings covered in white foam structures that absorb electromagnetic waves. The only thing in here is a brown backpack-sized box with antenna sticking out.
When we do the testing, these are either here in the 3 meters.
It's a Nokia military radio designed to be carried by soldiers in the field, creating a 5G network bubble for secure communications within a small team. Here it's being tested to make it safe against enemy electromagnetic interference.
In Oulu we have been already now for 52 years, and the first task was to create a radio communication system for the Finnish Defence Forces.
That's Mikko Hautala, Nokia's Chief Geopolitical and Government Relations Officer. He explains that mobile communications technology is becoming increasingly important for defence, both on and off the battlefield.
NATO adopted 5G as a military standard last June. And if you look at what happens in Ukrainian defensive war, you see all those drones. So you actually have a massive amount of data that you have to move between these different devices and your command center.
How important is it for NATO as the defence alliance to have a Finnish company supplying this kind of technology so you don't have to depend on, say, China?
I think it's really key part of the strategic sovereignty, so capability of Europe and NATO to really act independently and manage all those networks in a secure manner.
China has reacted angrily after the government banned Huawei from the UK's 5G networks amid security concerns. It's a major...
In 2020, the UK became the first of many European countries choosing not to use Chinese technology when rolling out 5G. The argument was that such a crucial part of a country's infrastructure should not be entrusted to so-called high-risk vendors. The fear was, and remains, espionage or even sabotage from the Chinese state.
And we are starting from here, and we have a couple of gentlemen here.
6G has the potential to become even more contentious. The technology will not only allow for very fast data transfer between mobile phones, it could also act as a radar, because the high-frequency radio signals 6G uses can bounce off physical objects and map them. Nokia's Chief Geopolitical Officer Mikko Hautala again.
So it will see things and it can measure things as a network. So it will acquire new capabilities that we didn't have earlier. But it's also, as a system, makes the whole AI era possible because of the speed and capacity.
But as we all know, it's not only about infrastructure in terms of Nokia or hardware.
Now, Nokia does face strong competition in the field of 6G and mobile communications technology from Ericsson in neighbouring Sweden, and Chinese Huawei is still considerably bigger than both of them. But the man you can hear behind me now is none other than Finland's President Alexander Stubb. He's paid a surprise visit to this opening ceremony of the new R&D facilities here in Oulu. That could be seen as a signal of how important the Finns believe Nokia is to Finland and to the rest of Europe. Lars Bevanger, DW in Oulu.
Now, a treat. Hidden for centuries, music by women composers of the Renaissance has largely remained outside the public canon. Musica Secreta is an ensemble dedicated to researching and performing this repertoire, combining historical scholarship with an all-female sound world. These are voices which echo through the generations to us, speaking to us now in a moment when, once again, female voices are increasingly finding themselves pushed to the margins. Here's arts journalist Brendan O'Shea to guide you through 15 minutes of pure loveliness.
For centuries, women's voices in music were confined to secrecy. Courtiers, courtesans, actrices and cloistered nuns created brilliant, inventive music, but it was hidden from public recognition. Musica Secreta is a group dedicated to bringing these long-suppressed voices back to life. The ensemble was founded by the late soprano Deborah Roberts in the 1980s. She was driven by a passion for women's polyphony and the hidden repertoire of Renaissance Italy. She inspired and mentored the group until her passing in 2024. Today, musicologist and historian Laurie Strauss serves as the ensemble's overall director and was, too, a long-time collaborator of Deborah Roberts. She continues the group's mission, often premiering works she uncovers through her own academic research.
Deborah loved polyphony, and Deborah was fascinated by the history of women singers and their place in music history.
By performing works by Maddalena Casulana, Barbara Strozzi and Isabella Leonarda, Musica Secreta restores the music of women once hidden in convents and courts, allowing their artistry to resonate today. Christina Watt, the ensemble's lutenist and a singer, explains what made this secretive female musical culture so special.
I think what is amazing is that we're sort of able to explore this world, which was a very secret world back various time periods in the 16th century, 17th century, of women being in community together and making music and having their own sort of supportive community.
Claire Williams, the ensemble's onstage director and keyboard player, explains the distinctive musical approach that defines Musica Secreta.
Well, it isn't at all continuo playing. So when you play continuo, you normally have a bass line and chords, figured bass, and you're sort of playing a harmonic structure. With this kind of music that they do, because it's all equal voice and upper voices, there are a lot of kind of crossing over of the lines and so on. So I realised quite quickly that just playing continuo didn't really work I felt, for the kind of sound that they make. So I've kind of gone more into a doubling. So color parte, we call it. So it's literally sort of playing everything that the singers are doing.
This intricate interplay between voices and instruments is also reflected in the work of lutenist Christina Watt.
Sometimes there's musical motifs that I have and the singers don't have for a start, and they pick it up and they develop it. So I think that as an instrumentalist, you have to think, even though I'm not singing, I've got to think about how do I express those lines, how do I try and sort of make it sound as if the syllables are there and then the accents of the text are there in what I'm playing.
In the past, these private musical gatherings allowed women to compose and perform boldly, even when society sought to silence them. Today, the ensemble says the atmosphere remains uniquely special.
It's so different from any other vocal ensemble I work with because there are no men. It's a female voice texture. I suppose it's so complete in that as well, because there is a considerable amount of range within the female voice. So playing with that, when I'm in that world, I don't really miss anything. I don't miss the guys.
That sense of camaraderie and enjoyment is echoed by Caroline Trevor.
We always have a good time, whatever the music is, whether we're in a freezing cold church or whatever. The dynamic is great. Even if there are little niggles, it's easily sorted, and I love it.
But it hasn't all been smooth sailing. Laurie Strauss highlights the long shadow of misogyny in music history.
There are so many assumptions that we make because of the way history is written. History is written by genealogies. It's written through kind of the great men and who inherits what from whom. And the best analogy I have to describe how great women composers and musicians and music makers are described in even enlightened histories is they're put in a box. Like if you in a textbook where you might highlight something important, you put it in a box. And so the women of Ferrara are in a box. Maddalena Casulana is in a box. Barbara Strozzi is in a box. And the flow of music history flows around them like a river around an island, and then it closes over them again. And then it may open up again over another female musician, and then it closes over them again. We don't see women's music making as an integral part of our music history.
The ensemble sings from the historic choir books, and this requires intense focus, as every member follows their own line and keeps track of subtle cues. Ensemble member Victoria Cooper explains the process.
For gigs, we're on the choir book and there are congruences written in. So there's little pictorial symbols that mean that there's a sort of coming together point. If you feel like you've gotten lost, you can get back in there. And someone in the group will always mark that with a symbol of their hand coming down, which is super good. I think the thing for everyone that's difficult is remembering the length of the rest. It's not the notes, it's just it's taking your modern notation head out and remembering. You get into the flow of it.
Another important aspect of Musica Secreta, says Laurie Strauss, is that the ensemble values the individuality of each singer's voice, rather than blending them into a uniform sound.
But one of the things that we do really, really value in our group is that our singers have very different timbre in their voices. And when you're singing with more than two people in the same register, if everyone sounds the same, if you all have the same kind of vocal production, then it can be really difficult to unpick the individual lines. And in polyphony, it's really important to be able to hear the individual lines. So all of our singers have different voices, and we encourage each other to sing with our natural voices. But we'll work on matching vowels, because sometimes that can get a little bit nasty. But the idea that we have one singer with quite a bright sound and one singer with a much richer, darker sound, someone with a very steely edge to their voice, someone with a softer overtones, all of it helps. Nobody sings louder than anyone else, but you can pick out the parts much more easily when you hear those individual voices. And then, of course, when they have to blend, because they're all professional singers and they know how to do that, they can modify their tones so that they blend when they're singing chant. You don't hear lots of separate voices when they're singing chant.
The painstaking attention to each part allows the musicians to experience the thrill of discovery, whether in rehearsal or in the archives.
See, there is that moment. There's the eureka moment or the holy moment when you're in the archives and you can't scream because it's very quiet and very serious in the archives. And turn a page and you see something that then just makes your heart stop. And that might have happened to me half a dozen times in my life. I mean, something that was that big that I've actually stopped breathing.
Beyond uncovering Renaissance repertoire, Musica Secreta also channels its work into meaningful contemporary projects. Laurie Strauss explains one initiative close to the ensemble's heart.
The Boobs Project. So what we did was we created a playlist with all of our other early music friends. We looked particularly for motets and madrigals with about breasts, and any proceeds went towards breast cancer charities, because Deborah died of metastatic breast cancer. And it was always something that Deborah and I wanted to do. We always wanted to do the Boobs Project, but we finally did it. It still happened while she was alive, and we did the final release and a live performance in the BBC on the Feast of St. Agatha. And of course, Agatha is the saint whose martyrdom is her breasts are cut off. So her attribute is her breasts on a plate. So we thought it was quite a fitting day to do this performance.
Even today, bringing this music to audiences isn't straightforward. Musica Secreta faces the challenge of convincing the world that centuries-old works by women deserve to be heard.
So my musicological life goal, if you want to put it like that, is to allow women to reclaim ownership of Renaissance music in particular, and to make it as ordinary for women to sing Renaissance music as it was in the 16th century.
Musica Secreta gives voice to women who were long silenced, restoring brilliance, agency, and a music history that finally listens. Most importantly, as Laurie Strauss says, it brings the world brilliant music. For DW, this is Brendan O'Shea in Berlin.
Arts journalist Brendan O'Shea and the members of Musica Secreta, bringing the not quite lost female voices of the European Renaissance to your ears. Links in the show notes. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe.
When headlines get louder, we go deeper.
Say hello to Berlin Briefing,
Your guide to Germany's impact on the world. Between East and West, autocrats and democrats, Germany's whole system is under stress.
pressure from all sides.
And the world around Germany is getting more dangerous.
Is democracy glitching? Too much noise? Too little clarity?
We decode what it means for you. From Berlin to right where you are.
It's all in Berlin Briefing on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, move over nostalgia, the future has come knocking. The last episode of producer Laura Kabelka's Age is Just a Number series features Polish finance specialist and inclusion activist Jakub Gietka. Jakub lives with spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, a rare neuromuscular disorder that causes progressive muscle weakness and wasting. He is the founder of the Aiming for the Future Foundation, which supports people with disabilities in Poland by providing information on autonomy and economic empowerment.
I wanted to create a project that would allow persons with disabilities, and especially families with different persons with disabilities, to have guidance through the system. Unfortunately, it might sound a little bit like a bad publicity of Poles, but it seems as if the system is not taking care of these individuals. Most of the families after diagnosis of a child with disability are left on their own. After having heard such a bad information from a doctor, you have to not only feel it, you have to digest it and you have to process it. That's why I think I might step into this world and to support these families, because myself, my parents actually didn't have that information when I was a child, and I was just told I wouldn't live beyond the age of 6. So yeah, and I'm 25 right now, so happy to be here. So mostly we are focusing on the aspect of personal assistance care in Poland, which is still not available. That the law that was supposed to be passed by the government is still again, work in progress. It's not like in Germany and France and UK that you are allowed to have 24/7 personal assistance for individuals with the most severe disability condition. Normally, the state budget is not supporting this. It's only, for example, 300 hours per year. Well, when we count it down, 365 days. It's really not that much. I need almost 24 hours, somebody who could support me. And yeah, family, friends you have to rely on. Otherwise, you are being left alone. We are waiting for the final outcome. I really hope it can finally be a reality, not just some sort of agenda in the documentation saying, okay, we will support this persons with disabilities one day, but maybe let's postpone it till another political elections, which is, for me, it's difficult to understand. So my goal is basically to provide the support for individuals with disabilities, but also to provide the certification for these people who might be working as personal assistants, right? Unfortunately, this is felt sometimes that working as a personal assistant, it's not a really professional job, but I want to work on the awareness part as well, that it is crucial part because it can give you the independence that we are all striving to have, right? To allow them to actually think about other aspects of life, not just existing, but actually on living. The second one is the financial aid. So each year we are focusing on different individuals with disabilities to promote and to support their independent living. So for example, last year we gathered several thousand zlotys to buy not only rehabilitation and different therapies for a young boy that really needed it, but also by supporting them and having some I would call it post-support assistance. So they can always call me, either the families or these individuals, asking, for example, how can they apply for a scholarship or something regarding their disability status. I want it to be not just we are gathering money and afterwards bye-bye, but I really like it to be as a family, right?
I'm incredibly happy to share with you that you are one of the selected Lead 2030 Challenge winners. Congratulations, you will get a $50,000 grant.
And right now the sort of breakthrough is the Lead 2030 Challenge, which allowed me to receive $50K to provide the platform to build the program application for all of the mobile phones and also the web application. And hopefully you will also hear about the project when we finish doing it. An application as such not yet exists in Poland that would just give the most important information. I charmingly called it 10 steps after diagnosis. So different measures from getting the certificate of disability, what are the rights for a patient with disability, how can we approach the education subject, right? Education at home or private tutor or whatever, yeah? Hopefully, yeah, it will be also spread among other countries, because I think this idea can not only be promoted just in Poland, but I wanted this platform to be easily accessible to other nations as well. I'm here to share the experience, to show that everything is possible. Sometimes I call myself even a similar like a person to Da Vinci, because I have to tackle different things like financing, management, team building, trying to find different opportunities, connect with other institutions, and trying to spread the word. And we have to sometimes even do the manifestation strikes and stuff, but mostly we are not being listened to. So you have to fight for your rights, find the knowledge, find the information that you I guess you were supposed to get from doctors.
The voice of Jakub Gietka, Polish finance specialist and inclusion activist, concluding Laura Kabelka's Age is Just a Number series in partnership with the global youth platform One Young World. That's it for today. This programme was produced by Laura Kabelka and me, Kate Laycock. Our sound engineer was Navina Boot. Our feedback address is insideeurope@dw.com. Inside Europe comes to you from DW in Bonn.